Hey there, reader leaders. Thanks for tuning in to episode 1 of Read, Rated, Reviewed, where we read, rate, and review books so you don't have to, based on our highly subscribed LinkedIn newsletter, Read, Rated, Reviewed. And our first book that we're launching with today is an exciting one. I couldn't put it down. I come to it time and time and again, and we're going to be delving into key insights and key takeaways. So the first book we're going to be delving into is, of course, Stephen King's On Writing, a memoir of the craft. Now, it seems that I do come back to this book every now and then, every few years, and can't remember the first time I read it. I believe it may have been in 2015 when I got married with my wife, and it has been one of my personal favorites on the craft. Now, it's part biography, part collection of tips for the inspiring writer, and when it came out, it was an absolute sensation. It was an extremely well received, right up there with the greats like Bird by Anne Lamott, which is another great review, which we'll talk about later down the track, and also Elements of Style by White and Strunk, an absolute classic if you want to know how to frame your grammar and vocabulary. But funnily enough, I was never really into Stephen King. It was my barber back in the day. I know I don't have much hair, but when I was getting my hair cut at the barber, he suggested I get into a series called The Dark Tower. Now, for those of you who don't know about The Dark Tower, it tells the tale of a gunslinger who is chasing down a nefarious character called the Man in Black. And in fact, the opening lines that came to Stephen King one day in the first book, The Gunslinger, were called, and it was quoted, "The Man in Black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed." And it is just an absolutely captivating few lines, and it got me into that. I was hooked, and I read the whole series. So it was after I finished that series, it got me into this book on writing. My brother suggested it, and you'll see why it's very special. It's subtitled A Memoir of the Craft, and I assure you, it's nothing like else that King has written. It is part biopic, part writing style, and it's set in 3 distinct parts, which we'll go through. And it's written in the late 90s, when he was well into his career, straddling the headline news as well, because he got into a horrific accident. Someone hit him with a van, almost lost his life, but we'll talk about that. And it was basically a guy distracted by his dog in the van, but more to come. So the first part is a memoir, it's titled, beginning with his early childhood and those that relate to his writing. The second part is, the CV, the nuts and bolts of writing, more advice on the craft, and it delves into what's called the toolbox, where, he got it from his grandfather who used to fix things around the house, and he'd bring his toolbox, and that's what you use to fix various things like windows and washers and things. So when it comes to your writing, if I only gave you 100 words, would you be able to write good writing with it? So you need to have a toolbox of great vocabulary, grammar, ways to set sentences and things like that. And that's what he calls the toolbox in On Writing. And then the third is the wrap-up, which includes a harrowing story where he really nearly meets his maker, really. And it's all about his survival and recovery. It's titled On Living, a Postscript. So 3 very, very distinct parts. So I will clarify, the first one is the memoir, the second part is the toolbox, and the third one is titled Living, on Living, a Postscript. So it's very measured, witty, and clever, and well put together book, and by no means a very long read. If you have a look here, you could probably get it done within a couple of days, maybe a day for you diehards. It's only 284 pages, which is surprising given it's half biography, half writing guide. But we're talking about the man who brought us The Shawshank Redemption, The Shining, The Green Mile. So it's not surprising that he's able to condense so much into 284 pages. He's able to write quickly, self-edit, and churn out compelling plots, not to mention the love of writing, which borders on reverent tenderness, which he talks about. When I think back to my rereads of this book, what really strikes me is the stories and the anecdotes that make it up, which are compelling and engaging and based on his own experience, insider knowledge, and hard work that he went through. Now, you read many of these on writing books or sales books or various things that you want to know more about, and you expect the person to be in that industry, but most of the times they could just be life coaches or people that haven't really walked the talk. But obviously, Stephen King being arguably one of the most successful authors on the planet, you know you're getting his gems here. And one of the best stories of him is him coming home. He's a teacher at the time, but he was also working in a laundry at night, and he used to write as well. And his wife passed him the phone to his agent, and he picked up the phone, and his wife said, "It's your publisher. They're going to publish Carrie." And he originally threw this book out, and Carrie found it, got it out of the trash, realized it was an absolute game changer, and gave him some suggestions and submitted it. And he was going to make $200,000 off the first run, which is, extraordinary sum back then. It's still an extraordinary sum now. He almost didn't believe it and asked his agent to slow down when he was reading the numbers out, and he said, 2 followed by 2 zeros, comma, and then 3 zeros, 200,000. So it allowed him to quit his job as a teacher and become a full-time writer, which is all any of us can aspire to do, work full-time in the profession that you love. There are other great moments, which I won't spoil for you, but his advice of pulling adverbs out of everything, a habit that I need to do. I need to really get rid of my floweriness in my writing. I'm quite an enthusiastic person. I inject a lot of adverbs. For those of you who can't remember high school English, it's when it describes the verbs by telling us an action that happens. So you slam the door angrily, or you shouted at someone aggressively. It usually adds the word ly or the ending ly to all words. It's unnecessary. You can just say, I shut the door, or I was so aggressive, or I spat those words out at that person. You don't really need to add the ly. Just he likens it to a garden. You need to rip them out like weeds. He also says that show don't tell rule of writing, and adverbs are tell words, right? I believe he says that the road to hell is paved with adverbs. He likens them to dandelions. They may look pretty, but they're actually weeds that overtake your lawn. So he actually appreciates his editor getting rid of all his adverbs, and he says to write is human, to edit is divine. Even more ruinous to someone's writing, and indeed life, is when you use the passive tense. Now, the passive tense is basically lessening the degree and force that your words have, and it's basically taking a timid approach. So he gives the example, most timid writers write, the meeting will be held at 7 o'clock. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but it tells them or her, whoever's writing it, put it in this way, people will show that you really know. But purge this quizzling thought, he says, don't be a muggle, throw back your shoulders, stick out your chin, and put that meeting in charge, right? The meeting's at 7. There, by God, don't you feel better, he says. So I think we can all be more direct in what we're saying. And another thing, remember, the writer threw the rope, not the rope was thrown by the writer. Please, oh please. Another immortal maxim in this book, which I absolutely love and subscribe to, is when you're writing, do not come lightly to the blank page. Come in and sit down somewhere and actually work in the office environment or wherever you need to get your inspiration. Do not sit on the couch and watch TV. Do not do it half-heartedly. You don't do your work like that, so why would you do your writing like that? And he also suggests that 2,000 words is a great aspiration every time you sit down to write. So as soon as you hit that 2,000 words, I think Raymond Chandler used to hit that 2,000 words, no matter where he was up to, he'd stop. So aim for that. And I think R.L. Stine from Goosebumps fame does the same thing. But I digress. Where was I? Back to the stories. I feel very endeared by King's life and very much in awe of it, especially as he wrote Carrie while moonlighting in a dingy laundry. I think that's such a fantastic story. And some other authors I know, have kids, single mother, had to write like Anne Lamott after work in her wee hours of the morning, which is quite incredible when you think about it. Throughout the work He keeps pulling you to walk beside him, and he is completely honest, frank, and not afraid to embrace tradition where it makes sense and buck the trends where we need to get rid of some of those old hackneyed views. And the whole important point of being a writer in this book is to tell the truth. Even with fiction, you're telling the truth as you know it. And he also suggests, write what you know, and he can combine two ideas. So in terms of Carrie, it was a girl who was picked on and bullied, but also had telekinetic powers. And if you throw two ideas together, you can get something great out of it. And he says people like to read about people's jobs. God knows why. So if you had a job as a hotelier or in retail, there's some great books like What You Didn't Know Is in the Library. It's about people, like one person's a librarian who gives people advice. It's a human nature to like people and follow their roles. Some other nuggets are, and I really was endeared by this. First, write with the door closed just for you, and then rewrite with the door open. What that means is, get it all on paper and make sure you get it all out of your mind, and then write for the audience in terms of your ideal reader. And for Stephen King, that's Tabby, his wife. He writes for her, and if he can make her laugh, he knows that his audience will like it. Now, also stopping because a piece of work is hard or emotionally or imaginatively draining is a bad idea. Sometimes you just have to go on and push through it, and sometimes you're doing the good work and it feels like you're managing, all you're managing to do is shovel shit from a sitting position. He still urges you to keep going. Now, on Truth, the author is quite upfront about his years of addiction. Albeit, there's only a few lines and maybe a couple of paragraphs at best on this, but it's really truthful and deep, and he talks raw and real about his addiction to both alcohol and cocaine. They were his drugs of choice, and I think he subscribed to the erroneous belief that some of the great late great artists had, like Hemingway, where you need to be, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Kubla Khan and all those things, that you have to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol to make great art, which is absolutely not the case. His family certainly thought that wasn't the case either. They staged an intervention when they found the rubbish bin was almost overflowing with empty bottles, and his writing desk was found with all bloody tissues from his cocaine use. So to King's credit, there were no excuses, there wasn't a pity party, and he said it was a hard road on his road to recovery. However, he's had a life that is used to this adversity and rejections in his career. He's had so many more than people would be allowed into, and he shares all that in this book too. Now, to the accident that we talked about, he was hit by a van on a regular walk in Maine, 1999. There was a gentleman who had a dog in the car. He was trying to reach back, get him some steak out of the esky, and absolutely, almost killed Stephen King. And he had numerous injuries. He had 4 broken ribs, a spine that was chipped, a hip fracture that looked sideways, broken knee, scalp laceration that took 20-30 stitches. But what I really find interesting and funny in a way is the way he writes about it, because he talks about the nonchalant way the driver was speaking to him when he was injured. And it was absolutely priceless, because when he was lucid, Stephen King said, "I'm sorry to the man," and God knows why, and then passed out. It was quite humorous, and even more so because he survived. But like me, King aims to read about 70 to 80 books a year. So going back to that point, you need to read a lot and write a lot if you really want to be a great writer. You need to enjoy reading, but you need to enjoy writing as well. There's my little one banging on the door. He wants to say hello. King is very generous with both his time and praise for his peers, but what I was most surprised about was how very few of the books he recommends I've read. So while King is known to his fans and the publishing world as the king of horror, what he really should be known for is the king of persistence. So for Stephen King's On Writing, Memoirs of a Craft, I'm giving this book a 5 out of 5 rating. So happy reading for those that are going to get into this book. I highly encourage it. On behalf of myself and Benji, thanks for tuning in to Reader Leaders. If you enjoyed this review and found it helpful, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your fellow book lovers or those that don't have time to read it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments of this book, and always keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you next time on Read, Rated, Reviewed. Bye for now, everyone. Take care. Say bye, Benji. Bye. Bye.